And we welcome you to Talk of the Town for this Thursday, June 11th. I'm Gary Stevens. We got an hour of open line following the 10 o'clock news today. Patty Vandenberg will be with us in an hour with the What's New Around Holland segment, and Sarah Dockers will be joining us in the studio for our weekly Wellspring program from Spectrum Health Zeeland Community Hospital. But on the second Thursday of the month, we devote our first segment to Ask the Judge, where we have either Holland District Court Judge Brad Knoll or a member of the Ottawa County Prosecutor's Office join us to talk about some of the judicial issues, not specific any cases, but general judicial questions from time to time. And from time to time, we also have District Court Magistrate Vern Helder joining us, and he's on the other end of our Zoom connection today. Vern, good morning and welcome back to Talk of the Town.
Good morning. It's glad to be back.
Glad you are with us. And if you have a question for Vern, no, you cannot join our Zoom connection. It's just between me and Vern. Oh, you can watch us a little bit later on, and we'll have the video available on our website at WHTC.com. We'll render it a little bit. The audio, a little bit faster. We can do that. But you can join us over the phone at 395-1450, 395-1450. Since last we chatted, Vern, it looks as if the courthouse in Holland, as well as the courthouses in Hudsonville and in Grand Haven, will reopen. So why don't you brief us on some of the, shall we say, the new protocol that will be in place once the courts are back open for public use?
Yeah, so we are happy to report that we are going to be open again to the public on Monday, this coming Monday. The process is going to look a little different. We're only allowed to have no more than 10 people in a courtroom at a time. That includes the judge, the recorder, attorneys, and then the parties. So we are scheduling, for example, arraignments. We used to do arraignments in Holland just on Tuesdays. Hudsonville, their arraignment day is Wednesday, and in Grand Haven, the arraignment day is Thursday, but we're spreading those out. Holland is actually doing arraignments every morning, in the morning of it, on every day of every week. So, and we space out the scheduling. Instead of having everybody scheduled at 9 a.m., we're scheduling them at 8:30 and then in blocks of time so that we can maintain the requirement of having 10 or fewer people in a courtroom at any given time.
395-1450. More on the regulations in a moment. We do have a call. I'd like to take it. Good morning. You're on the line with Magistrate Vern Helder.
Yes, I have a number on here, and I can call that one, 395-1450.
That's the Talk of the Town program. We are open line following the 10 o'clock news.
Okay, I have a question. Mine TV is out. Can you help me with that?
I can help you after our 10 o'clock news. We are not open right now. We have a guest on. I'd like to keep the question specific.
I cannot understand you. You speak up. I'm deaf a little bit.
All right. I will try as loud as I can. You'll have to call after the 10 o'clock news. We are open line, and I want to respect the guest we have, which is Magistrate Vern Helder. So we'll have judicial questions now. We'll take open line following the news.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything.
Sorry about that. Again, thank you very much for the call. But again, we want to respect our guests. So when we have open line, please pass the word. We won't be taking any calls generic until after the 10 o'clock news. That'll be open line. And that is something that I've been trying to do it discreetly, but also, again, to respect our guests and try to make it so that we focus on them and their subjects. Vern, I apologize for the interruption, but you mentioned about the reopening of the courtrooms on Monday and a little bit of limited access for the general public. No more than 10, that's according to the governors and the state Supreme Court, who oversees all courtroom protocol in the state of Michigan. What other restrictions might be in place as the courthouses are reopening?
So everybody is going to be asked to wear a mask. If you do not come with a mask, it's my understanding that the deputies where you enter the courthouse will have masks available. And then we, of course, are going to require that social distancing stay in place. We have, like many other stores, we're going to have markings on the floor to separate people by a distance of at least 6 feet. We're going to have chairs that are marked that you may not sit in, just so we maintain social distancing. So it's really not that much different than going to Meijer's. We're going to have some of the same protocols in place.
Now, with relatively new setups, and in Holland, it's been a couple of decades, but to a certain extent, a relatively new courthouse setup in Holland, obviously a newer courthouse in Grand Haven, and the Hudsonville setup is still relatively new. Can you accommodate perhaps people who want to still observe but can't get in because of the space limitations?
Before we were open, we did all the hearings are published on YouTube. And so I'm not sure if that's going to be an option that's still available. So someone could watch via YouTube instead of physically coming into the courtroom. But we are going to limit the amount of people that are allowed in a courtroom at this point in time to 10 people or fewer.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines, granted, it was a few years ago, the Janet Chandler murder trial was held in Holland's courthouse because the Grand Haven courthouse was not built yet, the new one, and to accommodate the large amount of media interest in that particular trial, the crying area, for lack of a better term, was used as the media area to cover the trial. Obviously, with space limitations, that probably is not practical. That's what I was thinking, more along the lines of maybe trying to accommodate those, instead of having them in the courtroom, at least being able to see the proceedings, because they are public proceedings, Vern.
They are, yeah. All courtroom proceedings are public.
If you got a question for Vern Helder, he is the district court magistrate. You can ask it at 395-1450, 395-1450. Of course, the magistrate does officiate on certain matters, not over, say, a criminal matter in terms of a felony, obviously, the process that goes on with the district court judge and then to the circuit court, but other matters maybe on a civil basis can be handled by the magistrate, some misdemeanors as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I maybe am speaking out of turn, shall we say, Vern?
Yeah, no, magistrates, we do handle some criminal matters. We are allowed to accept pleas on most criminal cases that have a penalty of 93 days or less, maximum penalty of 93 days or less, and or fines of $500 or less. One of the exceptions is, for example, a operating while intoxicated case, which is a 93-day misdemeanor, and the maximum penalty is $500 in fines. We, as magistrates, cannot accept a plea and sentence on that case. But most of the cases that have a 93-day maximum penalty and fines of $500 or less are cases that the magistrate can accept a plea on. Now, as a magistrate, if someone enters a plea of not guilty, it will go through the court system. We cannot preside over a jury trial, for example, as a magistrate. So it would then be processed through the court system, just like any other criminal case would be. If the judges are unavailable, magistrates do handle some video arraignments, and that can be a video arraignment with a felony case. We do not do the probable cause conference or the preliminary hearing, although magistrates do have the authority to get involved in a probable cause conference, just not the preliminary hearing stage. But in our specific court system, in the 58th District Court, magistrates are not handling the probable cause conference on a felony matter. But we do get involved in some of those cases. We sign arrest warrants, for example, on felony cases. We do search warrants. And so we do get involved as magistrates in some of those criminal matters, just not in all of the criminal matters that obviously a judge can do. A judge has more authority than a magistrate has. But we do handle a lot of civil cases. I personally handle all of the small claims cases in Ottawa County, and that's in all 3 court locations. That's Holland, Hudsonville, and Grand Haven. We do hearings on traffic tickets. They're called civil infractions. Many traffic cases or charges in the past were misdemeanors, but several years ago, they changed those to civil infractions. So there's no possibility of a jail sentence and things like that.
Now,
So,
would you, the magistrate also have some jurisdiction if there were arrests made or tickets written in violation of the governor's executive order for stay home, stay safe, and safer at home? Would that have gone to the magistrates if there was any? And if there was, did it come to your office, or did it go instead to the judges?
I have not seen any cases as a result of a violation of the governor's order, but my understanding is the way it was worded is that the governor's order could result, if there's a violation of the stay-at-home order or one of the governor's orders, there could be criminal charges filed, or there could be civil penalties assessed. So I think there was an option whether to charge them criminally or maybe charge them with some sort of a civil penalty, which would be more like a traffic ticket, a civil infraction with a penalty. But I'm not aware of anything that has been processed in the court system. I have not personally seen anything. But I think it's my understanding it can handle either way.
395-1450. Let's get to the phones. Good morning. You're on the line with Magistrate Vern Helder.
Morning. Years and years ago, I was making a left turn from Douglas, from North River onto Ottawa Beach Road or Douglas, and I got a ticket by a county deputy, and I appeared in the traffic court, and the magistrate then was a ex-state police trooper. Do you have any doubt as to the outcome of that? I had to pay a ticket. I was in Ann Arbor years and years ago going to graduate school, and the same thing. I came up, the light was one of these overhead lights, and the judge, I said that it was yellow, and the state said that it wasn't, and yet the light was hard to see, and the judge deferred that the government had to prove their case. I think it makes a difference, the background of who the magistrate is.
Vern, your response to that, please?
Well, certainly background plays a big part of how we view things. First of all, I will say that if you had an ex-state trooper as a magistrate in Ottawa County, that was, I would say, at least 20 years ago. So that's been a long time since you have a ticket, since you've had a ticket, or since you received that ticket. But the burden of proof on the officer is a preponderance of the evidence because it's a civil infraction. It's not a criminal case. If it was criminal, the burden of proof would be beyond a reasonable doubt. So really what that means, if it's a preponderance of the evidence, is the officer is more likely right than he is wrong. So the burden of proof is significantly less. And as a magistrate, when we have those hearings, we do listen to both sides. And then we have to make a determination as to whether that burden of proof has been met. So the burden of proof is a lot less than it is in a criminal case, but the judge in Ann Arbor that you were referring to is correct. The officer has to meet that burden of proof. The burden of proof with the civil case just happens to be much lower than it is with a criminal case.
Yeah, but in the case in the district court, it wasn't that way. It was almost like it was stacked because of the state pays the salary of the magistrate. The state was the deck was stacked against you, whereas in Ann Arbor, the judge took it that the state had to, be not beyond a reasonable doubt, but the state had the burden of proof on that. It makes a big difference.
Well, first of all, we're paid by the county. We're not paid by the state as a magistrate. But the burden of proof, you have to listen to the evidence of both parties. You have to determine where was the officer sitting. Could he see the light? I'm not sure what you received the ticket for. It was a left turn, I know, you said from River onto Ottawa Beach Road. I don't know if it was a red light violation that you were cited. I'm not sure what the violation was for. But you have to, we take into consideration where the officer viewed the offense from, because an officer can only issue a citation if he sees the offense, with the exception if there's an accident. Obviously, officers aren't at every accident. Then they can make a determination as to who might be responsible for a traffic ticket or civil infraction as a result of the accident. But we have to listen to what the officer testifies to, and then we listen to what the respondent testifies to, and then we have to make a determination. And it is all based on a preponderance of the evidence. So the evidence didn't change between Holland and Grand Haven. The judge is actually paid by the state. So I'm not sure, without knowing the facts of each case and without knowing the testimony from the officer in each one of those cases, it's hard, for me to make a judgment as to who was right and who was wrong.
It was the same situation. The only difference was one was a left-hand turn and the other was, a straight through shot. There was no turn involved, and that was in Ann Arbor too.
Okay, I appreciate the call. Thank you. 395-1450, 395-1450. We would like those who are making decisions to be impartial, but we do have our backgrounds, and I think the fact that sometimes you feel that because somebody has a law enforcement background before becoming a magistrate, you would think that they would immediately rule in one way or another than, say, be somebody else with a more legal background, such as yourself, or some of the other judges and magistrates that we have had. And I think that was the biggest bone of contention, I believe, from that particular caller.
Yeah, I would agree. I will say that, our part-time magistrate has a law enforcement background, and I think sometimes he's harder on police officers than you would think. It's not that he automatically sides with a police officer because he used to wear a uniform, but and I think he does an excellent job, and we do try to be as fair and impartial as we can. But a lot of people do come into court thinking the officer is going to win automatically, and that's not really the case. But their burden of proof isn't beyond a reasonable doubt either. So.
Vern, let me step aside for a moment in terms of some of the local issues and some of the local things involving the district court to more of a general look at the judicial system in this country as it is right now. It is under some heat on the law enforcement side right now, but probably will be shifted onto the judicial side as the situation involving the death of George Floyd moves forward. Are you concerned about the judicial system and being an impartial setup now and maintain its impartiality? We see the image of the scales of justice and justice being blind. But then again, there are people who say we need justice and we want justice. And if the verdicts don't go their way, they feel that justice is not blind. Are you concerned about the overall state of the judicial system from law enforcement to the judges in this country right now?
Well, excuse me. I think everybody is concerned about those types of issues. I believe in Ottawa County, we do our best to be fair and impartial. But you can't always predict what's going to happen in a case. Especially if it's a jury trial, you don't know how that jury is going to rule on certain issues, and if they don't. And we'll take the George Floyd case for example. If the jury doesn't rule that the officers are criminally liable, or possibly maybe reduces the charges or convicts them of a lesser offense, it certainly could create a lot of issues again, like we have seen. And so that is very concerning. I think the court process is designed to be fair and impartial. We do the best we can, even if it's a jury trial, to make sure that justice is done. But there's only a limited amount of control the court has over the whole process. So yeah, it is a little bit concerning.
I will ask you a general type question, not so much for the George Floyd case, but in high profile criminal cases especially. have we gotten to the point now where trying to get an impartial jury of one's peers is becoming tougher and tougher and tougher because more and more, especially with police body cam evidence that's becoming available before any proceedings do come out, have we become so much trying to get an impartial jury that it's becoming at times maybe next to impossible in some cases?
I certainly think in some cases it is next to impossible because news isn't only just local news anymore. It becomes national news. There's all kinds of social media posts, and to try to find somebody who hasn't heard about the case or who hasn't been involved in some discussions regarding the case is very, very, very difficult. Most people like to hear the news and they like to become involved, and that's what we like. That's what America is that's part of being an American, right? And so, yeah, I think it becomes very, very difficult to find an impartial jury in those high-profile cases.
Well, that's a good question of you that maybe I think I've asked of Brad Knoll and of and others who have been on the Ask the Judge segment on Talk of the Town in the past. How are we going to see more and more cases where perhaps trials are going to be, different, change of venue, which is a little bit rare in real life, rarer than it is depicted in the dramas. But we're going to see more and more of these change of venue cases coming up.
Well, certainly that's one way to try to get a more impartial jury is to move the case to a different location. Again, I think with social media and news reports, national news, I think that is even going to become more and more difficult to find an area that maybe hasn't heard about the case or maybe doesn't have some connection with the defendant or, so I think it will be more difficult. But certainly that's an option, is to try to move it to an area where you might get a more impartial jury.
He is Magistrate Vern Helder of the District Court, and we appreciate him joining today on Talk of the Town during the Ask the Judge segment. Vern, appreciate the time. Look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
That is Vern Helder on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC. CBS News is next on the hour.